You're listening to Country First with John Gomez.
And welcome back to Country First on Long Island's only country station, 96.1. Yours truly, John Gomez, with you, bringing you the best in country music and the best in talk about our country. Now, joining me for the ground truth is my good friend, Larry Kelly. Larry, welcome aboard. How are you?
Great, John. Interesting stuff here for this week. We look at the post-election maneuvering and the transition from running for office to actually running the office. And the people that are looking to take over government are trying to figure out the dynamic of government. And it's a little like running a foster home where the environment teaches individuals to keep their heads down. How do you figure out in that context what the ground truth is? And how do these people that are newly elected get any credibility with the individuals, with the individual employees, the individual members of the town? How do you get individuals to offer up good ideas? And why in the world should these individuals trust these new government officials with their future? Because a lot of these people that got elected are part of the dysfunctional, the political. You start with zero credibility with the permanent workforce in the towns because they know these people very well. And we've talked earlier about Herb Morrow and his situation. I want to look at an advertisement that the town of Huntington Democratic Committee and the State Democratic Committee put out, which is basically an explicit lesson in bigotry. And the subject of the bigotry is something you don't expect. But remember back in your congressional election when Israel's campaign put out a photo of you that was so darkened it made you look
like I just came over the border in Texas.
Yeah. If they had known that they could use the anti-Irish bigotry to knock you out, then they would have gone for that one as well. And that's what they did in this campaign with Herb Morrow. What they did was try to use some phony information, use it in a last-minute negative advertisement to paint Herb Morrow as an Irishman with a specific problem that people who are bigots might relate to Irishmen. And they used it blatantly, and they used it successfully. And I think for the next year, we might want to look at the Huntington Town Democratic Committee and the New York State Democratic Committee that used this bigotry in their advertisements to succeed, to have Berland beat Morrow. Now, what did they say? They indicated statistics showed that Herb Morrow, as the zero salary a year mayor of the village of Huntington Bay, for the past 13 years, had an expenditure account for meeting with his village council at lunches or some such thing. And they gave him a blank $1,500 to pay for those kinds of expenses. So during some years when there were extensive PBA negotiations, he'd meet with the PBA council 2 or 3 times for lunch. And these expenses got stolen from the village offices and routed over to the Democratic Party paper owned by Gary Ackerman and some other Democratic Party operatives. It's called the Long Islander. And then they use articles which the Long Islander propounds to raise this bigotry in their negative advertising. And so I think what we want to do over the next year is take a look at why any employees in these town governments should trust any of these new elected officials who have had a record of this kind of negative advertising and using a blatant appeal to bigotry to win elections.
Well, let me say this. It's kind of interesting how, these mailers that they send out with all this information, and how they specifically used the Long Islander in this ad that you're speaking about, and they're taking a headline out of that out of one issue, which reads, "Mayor spent over $1,300 in meals." And of course, it's got the Long Islander logo, and as if it was Newsday. Now, as you said, the Long Islander, published by Gary Ackerman, the Congressman Gary Ackerman?
That's the one.
Yes, that's the one. And how they craft these ads way in advance, Larry. So they have the Long Islander. This is going to be their technique. This is going to be their strategy. So they go get the Long Islander to write up this column or this story, even though the information is can be very well explained by Herb Morrow.
And you throw on the top of that the appeal to bigotry.
Yeah.
The appeal that says, well, Herb Morrow's an Irish guy. So if he's having meals in a restaurant, that must be a bar tab.
Yeah.
You know, and they say his massive tax increases help pay his bar tab. Now, when you're talking about an Irish-American candidate and you're using that kind of inference, you go back to what Donahue, the head of the Catholic Association of America, says. It's the last allowable bigotry. You're allowed to do that to an Irishman. And I'm saying for the next year, I'm going to make it my job here to take a look at some of this negative advertisement that came into your mail in the last 2 weeks of these campaigns and hold these people's feet to the fire. Who are they? How were they involved? Were there attorneys involved? Did the attorneys draft these things? And what was their ethical responsibilities when they as attorneys drafted these things? How are you going to justify to your firm, to your family, that you went out and you practiced this kind of bigotry in a negative political advertisement? Account for yourselves. Accountability.
We'll have more with Larry Kelly and The Ground Truth right after this. And welcome back to Country First on Long Island's only country station, 96.1. Yours truly, John Gomez, with you, bringing you the best in country music and the best in talk about our country. Joining me in the studio is my good friend with The Ground Truth, Larry Kelly. Larry, welcome back.
John, that leads me to the next politician who has a trouble with the truth, and that's John Cooper.
John Cooper, you mean the guy who's termed out, shouldn't be running for any office, and it appears like he's doing more running for office than ever before.
And he very elegantly tried to throw some Suffolk police officers under his campaign bus this week, rather than just admitting that he had not told the truth in a press release, but he had decided to go ahead with it anyway, even though he knew it wasn't the truth. What you had was an announcement. If you go to LIPolitics, you'll see an announcement back on November 15th.
It's LIPolitics.com.
LIPolitics.com. Suffolk's Cooper keeps on delivering as promised. Shot Spotter, as a registered trademark, is now operational. Tuesday, November 15th, 2011. John Cooper was happy to give a press release out indicating that the county's first shot spotter is now operational in Huntington Station.
And I just want to let the people know about Shot Spotter. I mean, Shot Spotter is this new technique or this new technology that they have, and it's been used and implemented in other cities, where they put these devices at street corners that if it hears the sound of shots going off, gunshots, the police are immediately notified. They know where the shots are happening, so it enables them to get there fast.
Well, let me tell you about notification. Cooper was notified October 27th that the police department lacked the computers necessary to take in and transmit data for the Shot Spotter system, so that it was not going to be operational.
So he knew this ahead of time.
So he went ahead on November 15th, and he did this despite saying the October 27th call that the department lacked the resources to implement the program stunned him. So despite being stunned on October 27th that the system was not going to be operational, he went ahead and made the press release on November 15th saying, yes, it's operational. I'm a great person. And that headline that you can read on LongIslandPolitics.com from November 15th saying, Cooper does it again. Great guy. Well, we're going to miss the next guy. The next guy is Steve Levy, who said This story by Cooper is an outrageous fabrication by a publicity hound legislator who is trying to distract from the egg he has on his face after issuing a press release informing the public that ShotSpotter was operational when we were still awaiting software from the vendor.
This is Levy?
This is Levy. You gotta love. We're gonna miss this.
There
guy.
goes Steve Levy.
I tell you, you know.
You know what's interesting though? This is a $500,000 investment that the county made. One would think, and one would hope to believe, that as they're entering into these negotiations and trying to figure out whether or not this system's going to work, is our computer system compatible with the ShotSpotter technology? And if it's not, that's going to be an added cost on top of the $500,000. And we're just talking about installing the system. We're not talking about the cost it means to actually run the system. And on top of that, now we find out, and John Cooper's not telling us, now we find out that the computers that the county has isn't even able to run the system. So,
as Cooper said, let the bad guys beware. ShotSpotter is on the job and will be putting criminals on the run. These people that are in government now have to deal with these politicians coming into office. And I implore every newly elected official to go out there and meet the people who you will be overseeing. Talk to them about the real problems.
Now, when you say newly elected official, do you mean new elected officials that are coming in for the first time, or newly elected meaning they're reelected?
God, you give up hope on some of these people that have been reelected and reelected. That they've given up on the job, and the public just hasn't noticed. You have new people coming in ISLIP. You have Bill Wilkinson. Oh, God, thankfully getting back in East Hampton.
15 votes.
And you just look at what government can be. And you want to exhort everyone that's been elected or even reelected, come back to the people that work for you. Talk to them about the real issues. Maybe you can't get the 17% reduction in taxes that Wilkinson got in his first term in East Hampton, but you can make services better. You can make things run quicker, and do it in an ethical way. I look at some of these things that are out there, and Herb Morrow not getting in Huntington. It's a tragedy for the people of Huntington because the negative advertising, the bogus arguments won the day. But I think there'll be another day, and I think with her being out there making clear what the issues are for the people of Huntington, and us looking at the negative advertising and holding these people accountable for what they did, I think there might be a new day in Huntington soon.
It's great that Herb Morrow's staying in the game. And speaking of negative advertising, it worked in Huntington. We know it worked down in the Patchogue Medford area against Gianot. Of course, Rob Calarco used it. He unsuccessfully used it against Dean Murray, Assemblyman Murray. He used it against Gianot, and it worked. And we'll be right back with more of The Ground Truth and Larry Kelly right after this.
It's Country First with John Gomez on My Country 96.1.
And welcome back to Country First. Yours truly, John Gomez, with you. And of course, joining me is my good friend Larry Kelly with The Ground Truth. Larry, as you were saying.
Well, we're coming back to this issue of competence. And I was up at the Smithtown Building Department on Thursday, and Smithtown's building department was recognized by some independent experts as the best building department in Suffolk County. So I wanted to go up there, and John Cochran, the new town council member from ISLIP, went with me. And we wanted to see the best practices, what makes the Smithtown Building Department the best. And we had a great afternoon, and I wanted to send a shout-out to the members of the building department for granting us access to the way that they do things, and hopefully John will be able to bring some of that back to ISLIP, and we'll be spreading the message around the rest of the county. But we still come back to the evils of politics and what happens in those smoke-filled rooms. And ISLIP is trying to get rid of it and trying to bring a new generation of people that are not sullied by that to serve in the government. And they're getting out there to meet people, Croce, Senft, Cochran. They're getting out there to get the best ideas.
You know, Larry, I can't help but think about when I was running last year and meeting people on the platforms at the train stations, handing out my material, trying to engage them in some conversation, dealing with the issues. Because you know these guys and women who are trucking it into the city at 6 o'clock in the morning, 5:30 in the morning, whatever hour I'd get up to meet these people, they must feel the pain and the stress and the burden that is being placed on the average taxpayer here on Long Island. But yet they turn to you and say, you're just another politician. I remember this one guy, he said, you're a politician, you're a crook. And one of the guys who was helping me, give out the material, Captain Bob, I called him, he was an airplane pilot. He said, no, you don't get it. Gomez is not a politician. He's just a citizen. He's one of you. And he's trying to get in there to save the system, to help us. And the guy turns around and as he was heading to the train, he said, I'll give you 6 months. So even though there are those who are going in, entering the ring, fighting to get to do the right thing in political office, there's this, as you say, a sullied system, smoke-filled rooms. It's tough to battle that because it's ingrained in the people's minds. And that, quite frankly, is why I think a lot of people don't vote. Because there are still politicians in there that people have been voting for 6, 7, 8, 10 years. And, every once in a while, they hear about a fib here, a fib there, kind of, messing with the numbers and not really giving the public the right information. It's no wonder people question whether or not their vote counts. And what makes matters worse, the voting public, they see 2 or 3 candidates up there for a position, and they're thinking, well, I think they're all crooks, or am I just voting for the lesser of 2 or 3 evils?
Well, you go back to John Cooper's press release about, still performing as he's always done. And I think you're right, John. I think you were performing on that press release as you always did.
And meanwhile, they just had a shooting in Huntington Station a couple of days ago.
This is what uncovered the misstatement by Cooper. 3 people were shot in Huntington Station, and the reporters asked, well, what about that system that Cooper said was in place?
$500,000 later.
Well, it's really not in place.
Great. Well, folks, Larry, thanks so much for the update. I appreciate you guys for joining me today. Every Saturday, 8 o'clock, we kick it off. Hope to see you and speak to you next week. Signing off, John Gomez. Have a great weekend.